this PowerPoint, we're going to talk about how to construct an evaluative argument. An evaluative argument is one that you make when you attach a value judgment to something. So when you say, this movie was good, or this book was bad, this video game is excellent, you need to be able to define what you mean by good or bad or excellent. So you have to set up criteria, right? These are your criteria by which you judge that something is good or bad or excellent. That's the best way to defend your evaluative argument. There's two kinds of evaluations. There's quantitative evaluations, which is measurable, right? You have data, polls, tests. So if you are saying, for instance, that a movie is excellent, it could be that one of your criteria is how well it performed at the box office, or what its Rotten Tomatoes rating was, or so on. So that's actual hard data. The other kind of evaluation is qualitative, where you look closely at recurring patterns. They're not quantifiable, but you are still able to create a set of criteria about quality. So when you structure an evaluative argument, like pretty much every other argument, there's 5 parts to it. But this is how you would construct or you would structure an evaluative argument. You always begin with an introduction that leads to your thesis. Your introduction should always talk about why people need to care about this. Why should it matter? Why do they need to keep reading? And then it leads to your thesis. Where you stand. What is your position? Is it good, bad, indifferent, whatever? But your positions should be stated clearly in your thesis, as well as a quick summary of the criteria that you use to come to that position, to that conclusion. As always, the second part of the second section in your paper is going to be the background. So this is where you would provide context. So to continue the example of a movie review that I was talking about earlier, if you are evaluating a movie, then the background for that would be the plot summary of the movie, a quick information about the directors, the producers, if that's important, definitely who the actors are, historical context. Maybe a movie did really well because it arrived at a certain point in history when people really cared about that issue. So anything that gives context to your argument and helps the reader understand your point better, that falls under background. Again, background doesn't have to be like one paragraph. It can be part of the introduction. It can be a couple of paragraphs. It can kind of bleed into the body. That's fine. But this contextual information is important. Otherwise, people are like, what are you talking about? The body part of your paper is where you go back to your thesis and you look at your criteria and you explain them. So for each criteria, you describe it and then you provide evidence from credible sources, or if you're talking about a movie, from the movie to support that point. There's always going to be an opposing view section because we want to sound fair, right? So maybe you love this movie, but there are people who hated it. So you're not going to say, fight me. This is the only point of view that matters. You have to appreciate that other people might actually have other perspectives and other reasons why this movie did not appeal to them. So you have to consider that. And if possible, you need to refute them. If they say, okay, this particular movie was incredibly childish, then perhaps your rebuttal could be that not childish. It was meant to maybe evoke a sense of childlike wonder. Maybe the audience was meant to be children. That's why, and so on. So, but you do have to consider reasons why people didn't like the thing that you loved, or have other views, evaluate this thing differently. Finally, conclusion is where you wrap it all up. You come back to your warrant, the reasons underlying why you thought this thing was so important. It goes back to why it's worth evaluating this thing, right? Why was it important for people to understand and evaluate this thing that you're talking about? That significance is an important thread through your paper.